The afternoon sun slanted through the tall glass panels of the Westfield Galleria Mall, casting long golden rectangles across the polished marble floor. It was one of those slow Tuesdays. No weekend crowds, no holiday rush, just the soft hum of air conditioning, distant music drifting from hidden speakers, and the occasional clink of a shopping bag against a railing. People moved at a relaxed pace, a mom pushing a stroller while scrolling on her phone, a teenager trying on sunglasses in a kiosk, an elderly couple sharing a pretzel on a bench near the fountain. Near that fountain, right in the center of the atrium, sat a man who didn't quite fit in. He wasn't loud or disruptive. In fact, he was almost too quiet. He wore a well-worn leather jacket that had seen better days, jeans that were faded at the knees, and boots that looked like they'd walked 1,000 miles. His dark hair was slightly messy, and he had a few days' worth of stubble on his face. He wasn't browsing stores or checking his watch. Instead, he sat on the edge of the fountain's low stone rim, notebook in hand, pen moving slowly across the page. Every now and then he'd glance up, not at the shops or the people, but at the ceiling, studying the layout of the lights, the vents, the way the skylights were framed. To most shoppers, he was just part of the background, maybe a writer looking for inspiration, maybe someone waiting for a friend. But to the mall's security team, anyone lingering too long without buying anything raised a quiet flag. One of the guards had been watching him for the past 20 minutes. This guard had worked at the mall for over a decade. He knew the rhythm of the place, the way crowds swelled before holidays, the usual loiterers who came just to charge their phones or nap in the food court, the occasional pickpocket who'd slip in during busy afternoons. He took his job seriously, not because he enjoyed authority, but because he believed in order, in fairness, in making sure everyone, shoppers, workers, even the janitors, felt safe. He'd seen this man arrive alone, without a bag, without glancing at store windows. Just sitting, watching, writing. That wasn't illegal, of course. But mall policy was clear. No loitering. No lingering without purpose. And in his eyes, this man had crossed that invisible line. He adjusted his radio, took a slow breath, and walked over. The fountain made a gentle, splashing sound, masking his footsteps. When he got close, the man didn't look up right away. He finished a sentence in his notebook, then closed it slowly as if he'd been expecting this. "Afternoon," the guard said, his voice calm but firm. The man looked up. His eyes were calm, thoughtful. He gave a small nod. "Hey, you been here a while," the guard said, not accusingly, just stating a fact. "Yeah," the man replied. "Just taking a look around. Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," the man said with a slight smile. "Just checking a few things." The guard waited for more, but nothing came. No mention of a store, no explanation of what he was checking. That was the problem. Most people, when questioned politely, would say something like, "Oh, I'm waiting for my wife," or "I just came from the Apple store." But this guy offered nothing. And in security, silence often spoke louder than words. "You know the mall's policy," the guard said gently. "We don't allow loitering. If you're not shopping or meeting someone, I'll need you to move along." The man didn't argue. He stood up slowly, tucking the notebook into his jacket pocket. "No problem," he said. "I understand." But instead of heading toward an exit or even a store, he turned and started walking toward a service hallway near the back of the atrium. A narrow corridor marked "Employees Only" that led to maintenance rooms and loading docks. That's when the guard's instincts kicked in hard. "Hold on," he said, stepping quickly to block the path. "That area's off limits to the public." The man stopped. "I know," he said. "I just need to—" "Sir," the guard cut in, his tone firmer now. "You can't go back there. That's restricted." "I'm not causing any trouble," the man said, still calm. "I just need to see something." "See what?" the guard asked. The man hesitated. For the first time, he seemed unsure how to answer. He could have said who he was. He could have pulled out a key card or called someone on his phone. But he didn't. Maybe he didn't want special treatment. Maybe he believed that rules should apply to everyone, even him. "I'll be quick," he offered instead. But the guard couldn't accept that, not without verification, not with cameras watching, not with liability on the line. If something went wrong, a fire, a break-in, an accident, and someone unauthorized was in a restricted zone, he'd be the one held responsible. His job, his reputation, maybe even his license could be on the line. "I'm sorry," the guard said, standing his ground, "but you need to leave that area." Right now. The man looked at him for a long moment. There was no anger in his eyes, just quiet understanding. He nodded again slowly and turned back toward the main walkway. But the guard wasn't satisfied. This wasn't just about one hallway. It was about pattern, behavior. The man had lingered without purpose, avoided direct answers, and tried to enter a restricted zone. To the guard, that added up to risk. And his job was to eliminate risk, even if it meant making an uncomfortable call. "Actually," he said, voice steady, "I think it's best if you leave the mall entirely." The man stopped walking, turned. "You want me to leave?" "Yes, sir," the guard said. "For today. If you've got business here, come back with proper ID or during business hours through the management office." A few nearby shoppers had slowed down, sensing tension. A woman with a toddler glanced over nervously. A store clerk near the perfume counter pretended to rearrange bottles but kept watching. The man didn't raise his voice. Didn't sigh dramatically. He just looked around at the fountain, the skylights, the polished floors, and then back at the guard. "All right," he said simply, "if that's what you need." The guard walked with him toward the nearest exit, not grabbing him, not shoving, just staying close enough to ensure he didn't double back. They passed a luxury watch store, a high-end chocolatier, a boutique where mannequins wore $1,000 dresses. The man didn't look at any of it. He kept his eyes forward, hands in his pockets as if already somewhere else. When they reached the automatic glass doors, they slid open with a soft whoosh. Warm afternoon air rushed in, carrying the scent of car exhaust and blooming jacaranda trees from the parking lot. The man stepped outside. The doors closed behind him with a quiet click. He stood there for a moment on the sidewalk, blinking in the sunlight. A few people entering the mall gave him curious glances, maybe wondering why he'd been escorted out. But he didn't seem embarrassed. If anything, he looked amused, like he'd just witnessed something oddly human. He reached into his jacket, pulled out an old flip phone, not a smartphone, and dialed a number. "Hey," he said when someone answered. "Yeah, it's me. You're not going to believe this. I just got kicked out of the Galleria." A pause, then a low chuckle. No, it's fine. Actually, the guard was doing his job. Exactly how he should. Don't say anything. Seriously. Let it go." He listened for a moment, then smiled. "Yeah, tell the team I'll be by tomorrow and maybe bring coffee." He hung up, slipped the phone back into his pocket, and started walking toward the parking structure, his boots scuffing softly against the pavement. Just another man in a leather jacket, disappearing into the California afternoon. Inside the mall, the guard returned to his post near the fountain. He replayed the encounter in his head. Something about the man's calmness had stuck with him. Most people got defensive. Some yelled. But this guy? He took it like it was nothing. Like he'd been kicked out of fancier places before. The guard shook his head, adjusted his cap, and kept walking his route, unaware that the man he'd just removed wasn't just some random stranger. He was one of the people who actually owned the building. Back inside the mall, the guard walked slowly past the fountain, his boots clicking softly against the marble. The encounter had left a strange feeling in his chest. Not guilt exactly, but something close to it. He'd done his job, no question, but there was something about the way that man had looked at him, calm, almost respectful, that made him wonder if he'd missed something. Still, rules were rules, and in a place like this where hundreds of people pass through every hour, you couldn't afford to guess. You had to act. He checked his radio. All quiet. A store manager near the bookstore waved at him. Just a friendly nod, nothing urgent. He returned it, then glanced toward the exit where the man had disappeared. Already the moment felt like it was fading into the background noise of the day. But outside, the man in the leather jacket wasn't leaving. He stood near a row of potted palms by the parking lot entrance just out of sight from the main doors. He wasn't angry. In fact, he seemed more curious than anything. He pulled out his notebook again and flipped to a fresh page. With quick, neat handwriting, he jotted down a few lines. Security protocol strict but fair. Guard followed procedure to the letter. No bias, no hesitation. Good sign. He'd come to the mall that day not as a celebrity, not as a guest, but as an owner. Not the flashy kind who shows up for ribbon-cutting ceremonies and photo ops, but the quiet investor who actually cared about how things ran. He'd been checking on recent upgrades. New lighting in the east wing, improved ventilation near the food court, updated emergency exits. He liked to see things for himself, not just read reports, and he always came in plain clothes, no entourage, no warning, because only then could he see the truth. But today, his cover had worked a little too well. He watched through the glass as shoppers streamed in and out, teenagers laughing, couples holding hands, delivery drivers rushing with boxes. The mall felt alive, humming with routine. And somewhere inside, a guard was doing his best to keep that routine safe. That thought made him smile again. Still, he needed to check one last thing. There was a small access panel near the service corridor, the one he'd tried to enter earlier, that controlled airflow for the upper-level stores. The contractor had said it was fixed last week, but the temperature in that section still felt off during his last visit. He wanted to verify it himself. He waited a few more minutes, then walked back toward the entrance. This time, he didn't head straight for the service hallway. Instead, he wandered casually past a jewelry store, pausing to look at a display of watches, then drifted toward the back of the atrium like any ordinary visitor. He kept his hands visible, his pace relaxed. No sudden moves. Nothing that would draw attention. But the guard had already noted his return. From across the hall, near the information kiosk, the guard saw him step back inside. His stomach tightened. He came back. That changed things. Returning after being asked to leave wasn't just lingering, it was defiance. And in security terms, that escalated the situation. He moved quickly but calmly, cutting through the crowd with practiced ease. By the time the man reached the edge of the restricted zone again, the guard was right behind him. "Sir," he said, voice low but firm. "I told you to leave." The man turned, surprised. "I just came back to—" "You're not allowed here," the guard interrupted, stepping between him and the hallway. "You were asked to exit the premises. Coming back puts you in violation of trespassing policy." "I'm not trespassing," the man said gently. "I have every right to be here." "Then show me your credentials," the guard replied. "Employee badge." "Management pass, something," the man hesitated. He could have pulled out his phone and called the general manager right then. He could have said his name, and within seconds half the staff would have recognized him. But he didn't want that. He didn't want special treatment. He believed that if the system worked fairly, it should work the same for everyone, even him. "I'd rather not make a scene," he said quietly. "Then leave," the guard said, "because if you don't, I'll have to escort you out." Again, a small crowd had started to gather. A woman filming something on her phone lowered it when she saw the tension. A teenager whispered to his friend, "Is that?" but didn't finish the sentence. The man in the jacket noticed the attention and sighed inwardly. He hated this part. The staring, the whispers, the way people's faces changed when they realized who he was. That's why he avoided it whenever possible. But now, standing there, he realized he'd backed himself into a corner. If he walked away, the issue with the ventilation wouldn't get checked. If he stayed, he'd be seen as causing trouble. And if he revealed who he was, he'd ruin the very thing he valued most, the chance to see how people acted when they thought no one important was watching. "I'm not trying to cause problems," he said, meeting the guard's eyes. "I just need 5 minutes back there." "I promise it's important." "Important to who?" the guard asked. "Because to me, right now, you're a security risk. You were removed, you came back, and you're trying to enter a restricted area without authorization. That's not just a mall rule, that's the law." The man nodded slowly. He understood. Really, he did. The guard wasn't being cruel. He was doing what he was trained to do. Protect the space. Protect the people. And in that moment, the man respected him more for it. "All right," he said. "I'll go." But as he turned, the guard reached out, not roughly, but with clear intent, and placed a hand lightly on his arm. "Let me walk you out," he said. All the way. This time it wasn't a request. The man didn't resist. He walked beside the guard, past the fountain, past the stores, past the curious glances. The automatic doors opened again, and the warm afternoon air wrapped around them like a blanket. Outside, the man stopped. "You know," he said, turning to face the guard, "you're really good at your job." The guard blinked. He hadn't expected kindness. "Just doing what I'm supposed to do," he replied. "I mean it," the man said. "Most people would have let it slide. Made assumptions. But you didn't. You treated me like anyone else. That matters." The guard studied him for a long moment. There was something familiar about his face now. the shape of his eyes, the way he spoke. But he couldn't place it. Maybe from a movie? He didn't watch much TV. "Look," the guard said finally, "I don't care who you are. In that mall, everyone follows the same rules. Doesn't matter if you're wearing a suit or boots like yours." The man smiled. "That's exactly how it should be." He turned to leave, but then paused. "One thing, though. Next time, maybe check the vents near the east escalator. They're still blowing too cold." The guard frowned. "How would you know that?" The man just shrugged. "Just a guess." And with that, he walked away, hands in his pockets, disappearing around the corner of the building. Back inside, the guard stood just beyond the doors for a moment, thinking. That detail about the vents, it was oddly specific and accurate. Maintenance had been getting complaints from store owners on that side for days. How would a stranger know that? He shook his head and went back to his rounds. Later, he filed a short incident report. Individual removed for loitering and attempting unauthorized access to restricted area. Returned shortly after. Escorted out without incident. Subject calm and compliant. He didn't mention the vent comment. It felt too strange to include. Like a detail that didn't belong in an official log. Hours passed. The mall emptied as evening approached. The guard finished his shift, handed over to the night team, and clocked out. As he walked to his car, he couldn't stop thinking about the man's face. There was something about him, something steady, grounded, that stuck with him. Meanwhile, across town, the man in the leather jacket sat in a quiet diner, sipping black coffee. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick message. Security handled it perfectly. No action needed. In fact, tell HR to look into a bonus for him. He stared out the window at the city lights coming on one by one. It wasn't every day you got kicked out of your own building. But if it meant the people protecting it were doing their jobs with honesty and courage, then it was a small price to pay. And honestly, he kinda liked it. The next morning started like any other for the guard. He woke before sunrise, made coffee in the same chipped mug he'd had for years, and checked the weather on his phone. Sunny, mild, perfect mall weather. He didn't think much about the man from the day before. Sure, the encounter had lingered in his mind for a while, but by bedtime, it had settled into the background noise of a long shift, another odd moment in a job full of them. He arrived at the mall early, as usual. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few delivery trucks unloading boxes at the service docks. Inside, the lights were still dim in most sections and the scent of fresh floor wax hung in the air. He nodded to the overnight crew as he signed in, then walked his first round, checking doors, testing emergency buttons, making sure nothing had been left out of place. Everything seemed normal, but by mid-morning things began to feel. First, the general manager called him into her office, a rare thing. She was usually buried in paperwork or in meetings, not pulling guards in for one-on-ones. When he stepped inside, she was standing by the window, arms crossed, looking more nervous than he'd ever seen her. "Close the door," she said without turning around. He did. The click of the latch sounded louder than it should have. She turned then, her face pale. "Do you remember the man you removed yesterday afternoon?" His stomach dropped. "Yeah," he said slowly. "The one in the leather jacket?" She took a deep breath. "Do you have any idea who that was?" He shook his head. "No, should I?" She let out a shaky laugh. "You really don't know, do you?" Before he could answer, she walked to her desk and turned her laptop toward him. On the screen was a photo. The same man, clean-shaven, wearing a suit, standing beside city officials at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. The headline above it read, "Westfield Galleria reopens after major renovation. Investor Keanu Reeves praises community vision." The guard stared. His brain scrambled to connect the dots. That calm, quiet man with the notebook was him? The actor? The guy from The Matrix? And not just that, he was one of the people who actually owned the mall. He felt the blood drain from his face. I didn't know," he stammered. "I know you didn't," she said quickly. "And honestly, that's not why I called you in." She sat down, motioning for him to do the same. "Last night after your shift, corporate got a call. From him, not his assistant, not his publicist. Him." The guard braced himself. He'd been fired before, once, years ago, from a different job. And he remembered the hollow feeling in his chest, the shame of walking out with a box of his things. He wondered if he'd need to pack up his locker today. But then she smiled. A real relieved smile. He said you handled everything perfectly, she said. Said you were professional, fair, and didn't let anything sway your judgment. He told us not to say a word to you, not to apologize, not to make a fuss, the guard blinked. He defended me? He did more than that, she said. He asked if we could look into giving you a bonus. Said you reminded him why he invested in this place in the first place because of people like you. The guard sat there, stunned. He'd expected reprimand, maybe even termination. Instead, the man he'd escorted out like a trespasser had gone out of his way to protect his job and praise him. He's coming in today, she added quietly. Around noon. He didn't say why, but he asked if you'd be on duty. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. The guard walked his rounds, but his mind kept drifting. Every time he passed the fountain, he remembered the man sitting there, scribbling in his notebook. He thought about how easily things could have gone wrong, how a harsher word, a raised voice, a moment of pride could have turned the whole thing ugly. But it hadn't, because both of them had chosen respect over ego. At 11:55 a.m., he was near the main entrance, adjusting a crooked sign near the information desk. When he saw him, the same leather jacket, same boots, same quiet walk. But this time there was no notebook, no hesitation. He came straight through the doors like he belonged, which, of course, he did. The guard's heart pounded. He didn't know what to do. Should he approach? Should he pretend nothing happened? Should he apologize? Before he could decide, the man saw him, and without a word he walked right over. For a second they just stood there looking at each other. Then the man smiled, that same calm, warm smile from the day before. You didn't recognize me yesterday, did you? He asked. The guard shook his head. Not even a little. Good, the man said. That means you were doing your job right. He glanced around the atrium, the fountain, the skylights, the shoppers drifting by. This place, it's more than just stores and marble floors. It's people, workers, families. You keep it safe. That matters. The guard didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. I came back today, the man continued, because I wanted to thank you in person, not as an owner, not as whatever people think I am, just as someone who saw you do the right thing when no one was watching. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. This isn't from corporate. It's from me. For your time and your integrity. The guard didn't take it right away. I don't need that, he said quietly. I was just doing my job. Exactly, the man said. And that's why you deserve it. Finally, the guard took the envelope. It wasn't thick, just a few bills maybe, but it felt heavy in his hand. I also wanted to ask, the man said, lowering his voice slightly, would you be okay if I checked that vent today, with you watching? The guard almost laughed. Yeah, he said. I'll walk you back myself. And so they went, side by side, past the stores, past the curious glances, past the service hallway that had caused all the trouble. This time the guard used his keycard to open the door. This time there was no tension, no suspicion, just two men doing what they believed was right. As they stood in the narrow corridor, the man pointed to the vent near the ceiling. See that panel? It's still not aligned. Air's coming out too strong. The guard squinted. You're right. I'll put in a work order today. The man nodded. Thanks. They walked back out into the atrium. Sunlight streamed through the glass, catching dust motes in the air. For a moment it felt like any other day, but it wasn't. Because something had shifted, not in the mall, but between them. A quiet understanding. A mutual respect that didn't need titles or fame to exist. Before leaving, the man turned one last time. If anyone ever gives you trouble for doing your job, he said, you tell them to talk to me. Then he walked away, not toward the exit, but toward the coffee shop near the bookstore. He ordered 2 drinks, paid in cash, and left one on the counter with a note that just said, for the guard on duty. Thanks again. The guard never saw him leave, but later, when he picked up the coffee, still warm, he smiled for the first time all day. And from that moment on, whenever he walked past the fountain, he didn't just see marble and water. He saw a reminder that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, even when no one's watching, always matters, even if the person you're protecting turns out to own the whole place. Weeks passed, and life at the mall settled back into its usual rhythm. The guard still walked his rounds, still checked doors, still nodded to the same shopkeepers who'd worked there for years. But something had changed, Not in the building, but in him. He stood a little straighter, spoke a little kinder to the teenagers who hung out near the food court, took an extra minute to help a lost child find their parents. It wasn't because he'd been praised. It was because he'd been seen, not for his uniform or his badge, but for the choices he made when no one was watching. He never told anyone what had happened. Not his coworkers, not his family. He figured it wasn't his story to share. And besides, the man in the leather jacket had asked for no fuss, so he kept it quiet, tucked it away like a good memory you don't need to show off. Just carry with you. But word has a way of moving, even in silence. One afternoon, while restocking first aid supplies in the security office, the guard overheard two maintenance workers talking near the break room. Heard he came back the next day, one said, voice low. Just walked in like nothing happened. Yeah, the other replied. And get this, he bought coffee for the whole night shift. Left a note saying, thanks for keeping things running. The guard froze, cotton balls in hand. He hadn't known about that. And get this, the first worker added. He asked about him. The guard who removed him said he wanted to make sure he was okay. The guard swallowed hard and stepped quietly back into the hallway. He didn't feel proud. He felt humbled. Because the man could have done anything. Demanded an apology, made a scene, used his name like a weapon. Instead, he'd chosen kindness. Again and again. Then, one rainy Thursday, everything shifted again. The guard was near the east wing, checking a flickering light fixture, when his radio crackled. All units report to the main atrium. Management request. He frowned. That wasn't standard. He hurried back, boots squeaking on the damp tile from the morning's rain. When he arrived, the atrium was unusually quiet. Most stores were open, but foot traffic was light. And there, near the fountain, stood the man in the leather jacket. Only this time, he wasn't alone. Beside him was the mall's general manager, a few corporate reps in suits, and a woman with a clipboard who looked like she handled community programs. They were all smiling. Not the stiff-posed kind of smile for photos, but the easy, genuine kind that comes from shared purpose. The man saw the guard and waved him over. Hey, he said when the guard approached. Glad you're here. The guard nodded, unsure what to expect. Everything all right? Better than all right, the man said. He turned to the woman with the clipboard. This is the person I was telling you about. She stepped forward, eyes warm. We've been working on something, she said. A scholarship fund. For people in security, maintenance, janitorial. Anyone who keeps places like this running but doesn't always get seen. The guard blinked. A scholarship? For kids, she explained. High school seniors from local schools who want to go into public service. Police academy, fire training, even trade schools for building systems. Full tuition, books, housing stipend. She paused, then added softly, It's going to be in your name. The guard felt his throat tighten. My name? But why? The man in the leather jacket answered, Because you showed what real integrity looks like. You didn't know who I was. You didn't care. You just did what was right. That's the kind of example we need more of, not just in malls but everywhere. The guard looked down at his boots, scuffed from years of walking these same floors. He thought about his own nephew, who'd just turned 16 and talked about becoming a firefighter. He thought about the kids in the neighborhood who worked part-time jobs after school, just to help their families pay bills. He thought about how hard it was to dream big when you're told your job doesn't matter. This is too much, he said quietly. It's not, the man replied. It's exactly enough. The woman handed him a folder. Inside were plans, logo ideas, application guidelines, a list of partner schools. At the top of the first page, in bold letters, it read, The Integrity and Service Scholarship. No press, the man added quickly, as if reading his mind. No interviews. No cameras. This isn't about fame. It's about giving kids a chance. The guard finally looked up. You didn't have to do this. I know, the man said. But I wanted to. Later that day, after the group left and the atrium returned to its usual hum, the guard sat on the edge of the fountain, the same spot where it had all begun. He opened the folder again and traced the words with his finger. In your name. He didn't feel like a hero. He still saw himself as just a guy who showed up, did his job, and tried to treat people fairly. But maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. Over the next few weeks, small changes rippled through the mall. The security team started a new training module on de-escalation and empathy, not because they'd been told to, but because they'd seen what respect looked like in action. The maintenance crew fixed that vent within days and added notes to their logs about checking airflow in other zones too. Even the coffee shop began offering free drinks to overnight staff on slow nights. None of it was ordered from above. It just happened. Because one moment of quiet courage had reminded everyone that how you treat people matters more than who they are. One evening, as the guard was finishing his shift, he passed the bookstore. In the window, a new display had gone up. Biographies, leadership books, stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And right in the center, propped on a small stand, was a framed quote, typed on plain paper, no fancy design. The true measure of a person isn't how they act when the cameras are rolling. It's how they act when no one's watching, and they still choose to do the right thing. Below it, in smaller letters, inspired by a moment at Westfield Galleria. The guard stopped and read it twice. He didn't know who'd put it there. Maybe the store manager, maybe someone from corporate, or maybe the man in the leather jacket had slipped it in himself quietly. Like everything else he didn't ask. He just smiled, tucked his hands in his pockets and walked on. Because the best things in life, the real things, aren't shouted from rooftops. They're whispered in hallways, shown in actions, and carried forward in the way we treat each other when no one's watching. And that was enough. More than enough. A year had passed since that quiet Tuesday afternoon at the mall. Seasons had turned. Summer heat gave way to fall breezes, then winter rains, then the soft bloom of spring again. The mall looked much the same on the surface. Same polished floors, same fountain bubbling in the center, same shops with their ever-changing window displays. But underneath, something deeper had taken root. The guard still worked his rounds, but now he walked with a different kind of awareness, not just watching for trouble, but noticing people. The tired single mom juggling groceries in a stroller, the elderly man who came every Thursday just to sit by the piano player, the teenage girl practicing her skateboard moves in the empty corridor before opening hours. He'd started saying hello more, asking how someone's day was going. Not because it was in the manual, but because he'd learned that connection mattered. And then there were the visits. They never followed a schedule. Sometimes weeks would go by with no sign of him. Then, on an ordinary Wednesday morning, the automatic doors would slide open, and there he'd be. Same leather jacket, same quiet step, same notebook tucked in his pocket. He never made a show of it, never asked for special access. He'd just nod when he saw the guard, maybe say, "Morning," and keep walking. Sometimes they'd share a coffee near the bookstore. Other times they'd stand by the fountain for a few minutes, talking about nothing important, weather, a new sandwich place downtown, how the city's traffic never got better. But those moments meant something, not because of who he was, but because of what they represented. Two people from completely different worlds meeting as equals, simply because they both believed in doing the right thing. One spring afternoon, the guard was helping a lost child find her mother near the toy store when he spotted him again. This time he wasn't alone. Beside him was a young man, early 20s, nervous-looking, dressed in a slightly too big suit, clutching a folder like it held his future. The guard finished reuniting the child with her tearful mom, then walked over. "Hey," he said. "Hey," the man in the leather jacket replied. He gestured to the young man. "This is Daniel. He's the first recipient of the scholarship." The guard's breath caught. He'd read about the selection, how over 200 applications had come in, how the committee had chosen someone not just for grades, but for character. But seeing the real person standing there made it feel real in a whole new way. Daniel extended a hand, a little shaky. "Sir, I just wanted to meet you. My mom told me your story. She works nights at the diner near the bus depot, she said. She said people like you are why she still believes in this city." The guard shook his hand, feeling the calluses on the young man's palm. Someone who'd already worked hard, long before any scholarship came along. "I didn't do anything special," the guard said. "You did," Daniel insisted. "You showed that doing your job with honesty matters, that it can change things." They talked for a while, about Daniel's plans to go to the police academy, About how the scholarship covered not just tuition but books and even a laptop. About how his little sister now wanted to be a firefighter too. The man in the leather jacket listened quietly, smiling when Daniel got excited about his training schedule. Before they left, Daniel pulled a small envelope from his folder. "I wrote something," he said, "if you don't mind reading it." The guard opened it later after they'd gone. Inside was a handwritten letter. "When I was 10, I got kicked out of a grocery store for looking suspicious, just because I was wearing a hoodie and didn't have money to buy anything. I never forgot how small that made me feel. But your story showed me that not everyone sees people that way. Some people see the person, not the clothes. That's the kind of officer I want to be. Thank you for giving me the chance to try." The guard folded the letter carefully and put it in his locker, right next to his badge. As the months went on, the scholarship grew. More students were chosen. A small ceremony was held each spring in the mall's community room. Modest, no cameras, just families, teachers, and a few staff members. The man in the leather jacket always came. He never gave a speech. He just sat in the back, clapped when names were called, and stayed to talk to every single student afterward. The guard started attending too. He'd stand near the door, arms crossed, watching as young men and women, some in uniforms already, others in graduation gowns, stepped up to receive their awards. He saw himself in them, not in their dreams, but in their quiet determination, in the way they held their heads up, even when life had given them reasons not to. One evening, after the latest ceremony, the two of them found themselves alone near the fountain again. The mall was nearly empty, lights dimmed in most sections, only the soft echo of footsteps in the distance. "You ever think about retiring?" the man asked suddenly. The guard chuckled. "Not yet. Still got work to do." "Fair enough," the man said. He paused, then added, "You know, most people would have freaked out if they'd known who I was that day. Would have apologized 100 times, maybe asked for a photo, a favor, something. I didn't need any of that," the guard said. "You were just a person in a mall. That's all that mattered," the man nodded. "That's why I keep coming back. Not for the building, for the reminder." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the water ripple over stone. Then the man stood. "I've got a meeting downtown tomorrow, but I'll be back next month. There's a new HVAC system going in near the food court. Gotta see if they actually fixed the airflow this time." The guard smiled. "I'll walk you back myself. Only if you let me buy the coffee after." "Deal." And just like that, they parted ways. Not as owner and employee, not as celebrity and security, but as two people who'd learned that the most powerful thing you can offer another human being is simple, unwavering respect. Years later, long after the guard had finally hung up his uniform and passed the rounds to a new generation, people still told the story, not as gossip, not as a celebrity anecdote, but as a quiet lesson, that how you treat someone when you think they're nobody says everything about who you really are. And in that mall, on slow afternoons when the light hit the fountain just right, you could still see it, the echo of a moment that changed nothing on the surface, but shifted everything underneath, because sometimes the most extraordinary things begin with the most ordinary choices, and all it takes is one person choosing to do the right thing, without knowing, or caring, who's watching. It had been nearly 5 years since that afternoon at the fountain, the day a quiet man in a leather jacket got escorted out of the mall for no reason anyone could have guessed. Time had layered over the moment like dust on an old photograph, softening the edges but never erasing it. For most people, it was just a story now, something whispered between co-workers during slow shifts or shared over coffee by parents waiting for their kids outside the arcade. But for the guard, it wasn't just a memory. It was a compass. He'd retired the year before, after 32 years of walking those same marble halls, checking the same emergency exits, nodding to the same shopkeepers who'd become more like neighbors than strangers. His boots, once polished to a shine, now sat by the door of his small apartment, scuffed beyond repair but still too full of history to throw away. He missed the rhythm of the place, the hum of the escalators, the distant chime of the piano player near the bookstore, even the occasional false alarm that sent everyone scrambling for nothing. But he didn't miss it enough to go back just to wander. Not until the letter came. It arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between a utility bill and a grocery store flyer. Plain envelope, no return address, just his name written in neat, familiar handwriting. He knew who it was from before he even opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. They're renaming the community room. After the scholarship.
After you.
Ceremonies next Saturday, be there. Or the guard stared at the words for a long time. He hadn't expected this. He'd never wanted recognition. The whole point had been that it didn't matter who you were, only what you did. But this felt different. It wasn't about fame. It was about legacy, about making sure the next generation knew that kindness and integrity weren't old-fashioned ideas. They were the foundation of everything worth building. He showed up early on Saturday morning, wearing his best slacks and a button-down shirt he hadn't touched since his niece's wedding. The mall was quieter than usual, no weekend rush, just a few families and the soft murmur of setup crews near the community room. He almost didn't recognize it at first. The room had been renovated. New lighting, fresh paint, a small stage with a wooden plaque mounted on an easel at the front. Around it, chairs were arranged in neat rows already filling with people. Students in crisp shirts and blouses, parents holding programs, teachers who'd written recommendation letters, even a few former mall employees who'd moved on to other jobs but came back for this. And there, near the back, leaning against the wall with a paper cup of coffee, was the man in the leather jacket. He looked older, more silver in his hair, a few more lines around his eyes, but his smile was the same. Calm, grounded, real. He spotted the guard and walked over. "You came." "Couldn't miss it," the guard said. They stood together for a moment, watching as the room filled. A young woman, maybe 19, wearing a navy blazer and holding a folder labeled Final Speech, adjusted her glasses nervously near the front row. "That's Maya," the man said softly. "This year's scholarship recipient. Wants to be a social worker. Her mom cleans offices downtown. Works double shifts." The guard nodded. "She looks strong." "She is," the man said. "They all are." The ceremony began simply. No fanfare, no long speeches from executives. Just a few words from the program coordinator. A short video showing past recipients in their uniforms. Police cadets, EMT trainees, VAC apprentices, and then Maya stepped up to the mic. She didn't read from notes. She just spoke, voice steady but warm. "Most people think heroes wear capes or show up on billboards," she said. "But the real ones? They wear uniforms that no one notices. They stand in hallways and parking lots and bus stations, making sure the rest of us feel safe. They don't do it for thanks. They do it because it's right." She paused, then looked directly at the guard. "This room isn't just named after a person. It's named after a choice. The choice to treat everyone with dignity, even when you don't know who they are." Especially then, the guard felt his eyes sting. He looked down, cleared his throat, and when he looked up again, the man beside him was smiling, eyes a little shiny too. After the ceremony, people milled about, hugging, taking photos, sharing stories. The guard was pulled into a dozen conversations. A young security trainee asked for advice. A teacher thanked him for inspiring her students. Maya handed him a small card with her number. "If you ever want to visit the campus," she said, "I'll show you around." He promised he would. Later, as the crowd thinned, the man in the leather jacket walked with him toward the exit. They passed the fountain, the same one where it had all started. The water sparkled under the skylights just like it always had. "You know," the guard said, slowing his step, "I used to think my job was just about rules. Keep people moving, keep things safe, follow the manual." "And now?" the man asked. "Now I think it was about people," the guard said. "About seeing them. Really seeing them." The man nodded. "That's the hardest part. And the most important." They reached the doors. Outside, the California sun was warm but not hot. The kind of afternoon that makes you want to sit on a bench and watch the world go by. "I don't come here much anymore," the guard admitted. "Feels strange, like I don't belong." "You'll always belong here," the man said. "Not because of the plaque. Because of what you gave this place." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a key card. Plain, unmarked, no logo. "This opens the service hallway. The one with the vents. The one you wouldn't let me near that day." The guard stared at it. "I can't take that. Why not?" the man asked. "You've earned it more than anyone. But I'm retired." "So? Come check on things. See how the new team's doing. Maybe give them a few tips." He pressed the card into the guard's hand. "Consider it a thank you. From all of us." The guard closed his fingers around it. It felt light, but it carried weight. They stood there for a while. Two men from different worlds who'd found common ground in the simplest of truths, that respect costs nothing, but means everything. Before they parted, the man said one last thing. "You ever think about writing it all down? Your story?" The guard shook his head. "It's not mine to tell." "Maybe," the man said with a small smile. "But stories like yours? They help people believe the world can still be decent. That's worth sharing." He turned and walked away, not toward the parking lot, but toward the coffee shop where, sure enough, he ordered 2 drinks, left one on the counter with a note, and disappeared into the crowd. The guard picked up the coffee. It was black, just how he liked it. He sat on a bench near the fountain, sipped slowly, and watched them all breathe around him. The shoppers, the workers, the kids chasing bubbles from a street performer outside. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever is. But it was alive, and it was kind, and sometimes that's enough. Years later, long after both men were gone, the room would still bear the name. Students would walk in for interviews or workshops and ask, "Who was this person?" And someone, maybe a teacher, maybe a security guard just starting out, would tell them the story. Not about fame or fortune, but about a Tuesday afternoon, a leather jacket, and a choice that changed everything. Because the best legacies aren't carved in stone. They're passed from one heart to another quietly, gently, like a secret worth keeping and sharing.